Hey guys. Well, I gotta be honest, I'm not feeling too great today. Today has not been a good day for the old man. A lot of things happening, and on top of it all, I've been sick for the past few days. No, I do not have the cove, but today it finally caught up to me, and yeah, it was really rough. I'm sitting down, I'm feeling pretty decent right now. Well, relatively. But today, um, Nan requested something about the Grey Knights from Baldermort, and I'm always up for some Baldermort. So we're gonna go ahead and check this out. I hope you guys enjoy it because I know I am going to. Once again, if you guys have never watched me checking out a Baltimore video, I do not talk much during them unless I really, really feel like I have something to contribute because I just like the way that Baltimore presents his stuff, presents his lore, presents everything else like that. So this is less of anything else other than a watch along. So I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do because Baltimore is by far my favorite lore master on YouTube, flat out. Here we go.
My mind is all I have. It is my dreams, my thoughts, my very soul. And I am about to have it desecrated, mutilated, and parts of it cut out. And I have never been happier at this prospect than any other in my life. I yearn to be altered so. I stand in an interminably long queue of my fellow humans. With each step I get closer to the moment, the blessed time when I can have my mind wiped. The thoughts, sensations, memories of sights, smells and sounds of these last days removed. I want to push everyone out of the way and charge headlong to the front of the queue. I want to shout, to scream that I should be next, to be free of these dark memories and apparitions that haunt my every second. I cannot even bear to close my eyes, as the memories, the images, are scorched onto the back of my eyelids like a dark tableau of atrocities against the Emperor, against sanity, against every law the mortal realms obey. But I see the same desperation in the eyes of all around me, all those ahead of me, all those behind me. We are all of one mind, one goal, one purpose. To have the knowledge burned from us, so we can rest again. So we can go back to thinking and believing in a world of good, a world of safety, a world that is free from the horrors we have witnessed, to return to the bliss of ignorance. I will give anything to be cleansed again, to be clean, to be free, to be pure. Given the choice, I would even choose to become a servitor, a mindless lobotomized drone.
Jesus.
As long as these memories are gone, they must be gone. I cannot live with the weight anymore. For I have seen the things that stare at us from behind the veil. I have witnessed their lust for our destruction, our pain, our suffering. I have witnessed their power, and I am terrified. It has only been 3 days. Just 3 days since it all began. Cannot believe it myself. How fast it all happened. How utterly pathetic and naive I was. We all were. How our perception of reality was shattered in just under a day.
Oh my god.
Emperor, why won't this line move faster? Why? It began on a normal day, a normal morning, on a normal world. Cannot tell why it began. There are rumours, but few are really willing to discuss what we saw, or why. Some say that the lords of our rather unobtrusive and unimportant world grew complacent. The imperial tithes were being paid, and there was a higher level of prosperity than anywhere I have heard of in this sector. Perhaps that was the cause. Laziness. Laziness and boredom. I hate to think of that being it, but can come no closer to a better explanation. That our world was destroyed. We were subjected to the event due to someone being bored. Bored because their life was too easy, or bored because they simply wished drama, but did not wish the actual danger or the hard work of signing up to the life of the guard. All I can hope is that they were on the receiving end of this calamity as much as their hapless population of serfs. Somehow I doubt it, though. But I can hope. It is all that is keeping me from pushing forward. The thought that those responsible for this were somehow at the centre of the whirlwind when it hit. Small comfort. It happened so fast. As usual, I was on my way for my first shift, and the air was cool and bright. The first light of dawn slowly illuminating everything. The world was waking. It was then that it started. I've often been told to look where I am going. Look forward instead of up, as my father always used to say. But I was looking up. Perhaps the only one who was. I always asked the same question of myself every day. Why are some born to be noble, to live in glittering skyscrapers of light, while others, like me, are born to drudge until we die? As I saw the light of the sun kiss each skyscraper in turn, I saw it begin. The light hit the Tower of Pharos, and it was loosed. A scream seemed to come from every point above me at the same time. A scream of a million voices all in one. A scream of elation, a scream of joy, a scream of victory. With this, the light of the sun became unbearable, reflected from the shining spires of the tower of the House of Pharos. Like a myriad prisms all at once, the light went from bright white to every single possible spectrum on hue. It was dazzling, entrancing, but too much. The kaleidoscope of light reached across the skies, and all was bathed in its unnatural touch. The cows were too...
Slanesh Slaneshi heresy incoming.
Too much, too bright, too sublime, too true. Never before had I seen colours this dynamic, this bright. But my mind was in shock. The experience too much. I began to weep and then to howl. It was like pain and pleasure in equal measure, and all of it beyond my thresholds. The light obfuscated what happened next, but of that I am very glad. The eye too overstimulated to work correctly. The things I saw, the things I think I saw, is why I am so ardently in this line now. Pandemonium was loosed on my world, and everything I held dear and everything I thought I knew were shattered in that moment. The heavens broke, and holes in reality opened. When I even think of those swirling pools of light that appeared, my mind goes into shock. I wish to look away, but it is my memory I flee, so I cannot. Things came out of the portals. Things of such diversity of size, shade, shape and formation that I cannot even begin to describe. If I were given 100 years, I could not describe them all. But I would never wish to do this. Never wish to face the memory so starkly. The things they did. Each one dragged, pirouetted or slunk from the portals in space. These doors into hell. Then they wasted no time. Like long-caged animals that had finally seen a way to escape, they fell on all with a rapacious appetite, an utter verve that staggered me. It was their joy in it all. What they did to those they leapt upon. Unspeakable things. Unnatural things. Impossible things. I was so assailed by a cacophony of pain and pleasure, grunts of pure ecstasy, and screams of terror and pain and anguish from every quarter. But some things were similar, and some of them worked at seeming odds to the rest. One particular form of these horrors, like a gorgeous female human, but with unnatural appendages and claws and hoofs where other elements should be. They were the most regular of all the travesties I witnessed. Like acrobats, they bounded around the thoroughfare I was in. They did not stop to indulge in their vile needs. They just gathered, collected. I was one of those taken by one of those lithe but preternaturally strong beings. She scooped me up and ran with me across the ground, sometimes launching herself and I into the air to hurl a vicious and salacious scene that could not be otherwise passed. I saw a myriad of other beings like she, it, catching people, and they all moved in one direction. We were being brought to the amphitheatre of House Pharos. hundreds of us, thousands of us. As we approached the great building, which would normally permit comfortable seating for well over 500,000 citizens, again, it took to the air. It landed on the walls, her spindly but extended nails like knives cutting into the side of the edifice and allowing her purchase. She launched herself up the wall with me in tow. It held onto me by my foot, swinging me into the air whenever it wished to move faster and bound upward, only to catch my leg again on the downward fall. The jarring of my bones and muscles was little compared to the jarring of my world and mind. Each time this occurred, I let out a wail of pain, but only after a loud bellow of joy. The feeling of being launched so, into the sliding lights, the screams and grunts of pleasure and pain, cannot explain it. Despite being in mortal fear of my life, my world, my very soul, when I was hurled upward, my body and brain reacted in elation, even as my spirit screamed. We cleared the top of the amphitheatre only for her to toss me one more time. This time, she caught me with a gentleness, almost loving care, as if she held me like a child in her arms, and then cooed at me. Looking into her full black eyes, her hand caressing my face and wiping the hair out of my eyes, it felt maternal and gentle. She smiled an alluring smile that brightened her entire face. In that moment, I felt that I loved her. But the thought now makes my gorge rise. My stomach rebels at the very thought. So alien, so corrupt. Yet in that moment, I felt under her protection and thankful for it. But it was not to last. Its face went back to a mask of terror and rage as she dropped me into a chair and placed her hand on my head, her claws entirely circling my skull. She then twisted my head and forced me to look down into the centre of the theatre. My eyes locked onto the spectacle that was occurring so far below me, yet so clear despite the salt of colours and images. I was rapt. I did not even notice when her clawed hand was removed from my head, and I was simply left there like a puppet. I could not move. I could not look away. I could not escape. I was not even able to blink. My mind screamed. My body wished to close tight the eyelids that would prevent me from witnessing what was occurring below, but I could not. Days passed. I felt my eyeballs dry, and the pain of the constant crying made me feel like I would dehydrate before it was over. So intense was the experience. But I watched for days. The acts of debauchery, of degradation that I was forced to endure. At points I was titillated to the excruciating levels, only wishing to be involved in the smallest, most simple way, wishing so hard to be at the centre of the debacle that was going on. But at others I was repulsed as I had never been repulsed before. Inside I was screaming. It was simply not possible to endure this scene and retain sanity. It was too much.
I'm telling you guys, Baldermort just knows, like, I could listen to him read a phone book, but this is just creepy to listen to.
Unspeakable. Just too much. The thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, who used up in these twisted events I could not even count. But that is when it changed. When my mind was not only wishing for this to continue instead of stop, but more than this. When my mind was cheering and wishing for ever more extreme activities to occur. When I was actively wishing for this to never end and for it to only become darker and darker. That is when it changed. Somehow I believed that the acts I saw were all leading to this point. It was as if the hatred, pain, pleasure and lust that was unfolding before me somehow was feeding something. For the performance came to a crescendo. After this point a great thing arrived. A being. A rent in space like the others I had witnessed before, but of a scale much greater, tore itself into existence. From the centre of this rent in space, with colours and sounds even more intense than those I had already been subjected to, something seemed to force its way into existence. Like birth, there was a bending of the light, like the real world was somehow trying to push back and prevent this thing from coming through. But reality was not the winner in this struggle. As the light bulged and eventually a sucking pop rang around the amphitheatre, followed immediately by a cacophony of screams. Something took form. It started as a gas, a ghost at first, but the gas, the energy, filled in a shape, a form that became colossal in size and then solidity, brilliant with light and power. The entire smell in the amphitheatre also altered, from acrid to stifling, to pleasurable, to intense. Like the huge thing gave off some airborne narcotic. But there was nothing natural about any of this, I was sure. It had arrived. Somehow I knew that it was their master, them being the things that captured and raped our world and every living thing on it. It was their lord. The scream resounded across every chair, every glistening eye and statue-like watcher. But as the scream ended its first rotation, for there would be many more crashing across us like waves, everything changed again. There was a burst of light, 5 to be precise, but they were not blinding and not multiple hues. It was white light. It was pure. They were there, all standing at cardinal points around this great thing of evil. The figures were clad in silver armor that reflected only white light, pure light, not the myriad hues and colors that surrounded them on all sides. The being at the center, that which had been summoned into this reality, reacted with a baleful bellow of fury. Thus was battle joined. Not that I could describe it or explain it. The 5 warriors were dressed in the armor of space marines, Astartes, but they did not seem like they do in the vids. They wielded weapons that glowed and crackled as if alive, each one shining like a lighthouse in a storm. It was like watching heroic knights with solid suns in their hands, forged into the shapes of swords and glaives. Bolts of power rippled from one side onto the other and slammed into egg-like invisible shells around the marines. They were like
the things I love the most about listening to Baldermort's videos is the amount of work he puts into telling these stories, and they're spectacular.
Of the Emperor. They were like his spirit had been cut into pieces and placed it within armor to fight his very battles. The light that came from them pushed against the colors, broadcast by the evil entity. I could not look away. I barely saw out of the periphery of my vision that other lights had dotted around the theatre and were moving amongst us watchers, the unwilling crowd of witnesses, the congregation in this vile church. I was barely aware of them moving like the wind, cutting swathes of these female crab women apart as they leapt forward toward them. I felt the spatter of blood strike my back as a fray occurred behind me. Pieces of female things were thrown into the air and landed around me as the warriors of light butchered. This was happening all around the amphitheatre, but I could not look away from the centre of the play before me. The being made foray after foray against the shining knights. It would bound at one to turn on another, always moving and always attempting to escape the 5-pointed fence that the Marines made around it. As it moved, they moved. As it attacked, they blocked or withdrew. Never before have I been so enwrapped, so diligently watching anything. It seemed so little. The speed of their moves was like unto a dance, but the central dancer could not escape their support. Finally, all of the shining warriors began to intone a chant I felt glad to hear, yet did not know it. I have never before heard it. Hope to never hear it again. The chanting rose in power as the warriors struck at the beast in their midst, never tiring, never slipping, never taking their attention away from their prize for a nanosecond. It seemed as if the very presence of the knights dealt hurt to the monster. As it closed on any of them, its very skin and hair would erupt into flame, only to recover when it leapt backwards or sideways, when it was further from the shining knights. But eventually they closed so that it could not escape, and could not avoid being near any of them. Then it burned like someone had doused it in promethium. Its cries of rage and suffering rent at my heart. The huge burning thing was unable to escape, and the chant rose to a pitch whereas it seemed to come from everywhere, bounced around the amphitheatre in a round with the scream that had birthed the beast. Then one of the knights strode forward and engaged it alone. Their movements were too fast for me to see, for me to follow, but all ended in silence when the figures both seemed to suddenly stop. The knight stood stock still. The beast stopped, and then its head toppled forward away from its body.
Very nice.
As its skull struck the ground, everything ended. The single touch of its severed head to the dirt, and all was blown away like it had never happened. The lights returned to normal, the skies became blue, the walls white, the sands a dull yellow, where they were not drenched with the brown of dried blood and excretions. It was almost dull. And as one, we, the martinets held in thrall, were freed. I saw so many slowly slide their eyes one way then the other. Few moved at first, as if to move would break the spell and the horror would begin again. But, like a dam bursting, the wailing soon began. A shrill wailing that came from the very heart, the guts of everyone there. Lamentation and disbelief rose like a tsunami. For an instant, I wished that the Warriors of Light had not arrived. Then we could have continued to believe that this was all a dream. It had not actually happened. But the stark reality was that it had happened. Despite all of the things, female and other, simply disappearing without trace. And we all knew that it could happen again. This revelation broke many there and then. Those that did not weep began to jabber and scream profanities. For these, the work of the Silvered Warriors was continued, as they moved amongst the crowd, executing those who had blatantly been broken by it all. It was done swiftly. It was done cleanly.
Yeah.
The next day was a blur. Everyone in the amphitheatre was herded into transports and holding areas. The skies were ablaze and abuzz with the crossing of more and more transports. Where they all had come from, nobody could tell, but their intent was simple. All who had survived this event would be gathered. We did not know why then, but it was soon revealed to us that, for the protection of our souls, we could be cleansed. We could be purified by the Warriors of Light. They would burn the memory from us, but they would also purge the evil left dormant in us by merely witnessing it. We could be clean again. So, I stand in line and desperately keep my eyes open, locked on the person in front of me. I do not wish to close my eyes. I do not wish to see those things again. Emperor's mercy, why will this line not move faster? Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions and forces of the Warhammer 40k universe. Tonight, we will be investigating the very basics of one of the most secretive, powerful, and fundamentally important forces at the Emperor's command. Tonight, we discuss the Grey Knights. But are they to be washed away as a thing of the past?
No.
For the entire premise by which they operate, that the forces of chaos are to be hidden from the general population of the Imperium, is at risk. Why? The opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum.
That'd be a good
The
thing.
huge rent across time and space that spans the entire galaxy, from the Eye of Terror to the furthest outer markers of the Eastern Fringe. For out of this rent pour dementia, decay, depravity, and death, all of the attributes of the four main chaos powers, the dark gods of the warp. This great rent in space was opened by the fall of Cadia, and the culmination of Abaddon the Despoiler's cursed 13th Black Crusade, and from
Temper
it come
tantrum.
all of the legions of the warp. Hell itself now stalks the lands, and the fate of the Imperium hangs by a thread. There are few in the armies of humanity that can stand against such malevolence and power. It is the role of the Grey Knights to match such horrors blade to blade, to banish or destroy them outright. Of all of the forces of the Emperor, only these men can stand against the forces of chaos and hope to contain them and crush them. Only they. For they are unlike their brother Astartes, their brother Space Marines, in ways that are heresy to even know or discuss. The few who know of the Grey Knights are honoured and rare indeed, for by knowing of the Grey Knights the individual must also be aware of that which they were born and bred to combat, the forces of corruption. A rare person indeed. But let us begin in full. Let us go back to the very beginning of this august body of warriors known as the Grey Knights. Let us talk of their very genesis. But please do all remember that this is just an introduction only. More will be covered in the future when we are able to delve into the nuances that must be glossed over today. To quote, et Templars Mysteria ox ordo melius. Praise the Emperor for his sacrifice. As he endures, so shall we. We who are hunters of demons shall strive in his name eternally. We, the Order of the Hammer, shall delve into the dark shadows. We shall seek out the tainted. We shall pursue the vilest evil. It is we who stand guard, our eternal watch shall not fail, for we are the Ordo Melius. We grey knights are the hammers, we slay the darkness without fear. Founded in great mystery we were, chapter 666. Though on Titan we be hidden, yet our eyes encompass the galaxy. No devil shall elude our gaze, no demon shall avoid its fate. We shall be the keepers immortal, all secrets shall be our knowledge. We are the guardians of mankind. Caution and secrecy are our code, watchfulness and patience are our way. Hidden from the eyes of chaos we strike without warning or dread. Though we find ourselves in shadows, no blackness will ever enter our hearts. No treachery will touch our souls, no pride will sully our thoughts. We shall be pure amongst impurity, we shall be innocence amongst guilt. We are the Imperium's hidden saviours. We are spread across the heavens, our watch is untiring and ceaseless. The Emperor shall guide our souls as we guide those of others. Our will shall be our weapons, our faith shall be our armour. Our minds will be secure fortresses, no temptation will weaken our resolve. Though unnumbered lurking perils await us, our blades will ever be ready, for we are the Emperor's vengeance. Master of all weapons are we, no defence exists against our wrath. For the Nemesis shall we fight, with an Aegis to shield us. In bloodshed shall we save humanity. Death shall be our everlasting creed. War unending shall be our fate, in battle shall we be steeped. We shall be unstinting in hatred, for we shall hunger for holy war, for we are swords of justice. When all flee in hideous disarray, strong and sound shall we stand. Cowardice is wholly unknown to us. Our courage comes from the Emperor. Unbowed and unshaken against all foes, we shall claim victory with blood. Steady and surely we hunt them, those that dare oppose our wrath. Death stalks us in many forms, the grotesque and the utterly inhuman. We are the bringers of hope. Bloody battles
Yeah, I was having a really bad day today, and I'm glad I decided to watch this today. It really has brightened up my mood a little bit.
ending constantly await us. Redemption the reward for our vigilance. When possession rears its unspeakable head, ours is the blade that descends. When Empyrean horrors invade our realm, our exorcism shall hurl them back. There is no chaos-spawned horror which can resist our indomitable anger. With undaunted courage shall we prevail. No arcane magic shall overcome us. We are the bearers of victory. No corruption shall blemish our galaxy. No immaterial fiend shall be spared. No malevolent spirit will oppose us. No creation of sin shall survive. No unholy deed shall go unpunished. All blasphemous acts shall be atoned. No spawn of misrule avoids us. All are banished to the void. Nothing shall ever evade our cleansing fire, nor demon or spawn or renegade, for we are mankind's divine blade. Heavenly blessings are laid upon us. The warp is ours to tame. Though sorcery shall be against us, no witchcraft will bring our doom. Though spell or incantation block us, the Emperor shall see us victorious. No hex can overcome our determination. Our resolve is strong as steel. Sigils and wards watch over us. Prayers shall serve as our guide, for we are the Emperor's chosen. There is much darkness awaiting us, yet the Emperor lights our path. Falsehood surrounds us at every turn, yet no traitor shall confound us. No despicable trickery will thwart us. No damnation shall bring us low. There is no peace for us. For an eternity we will serve. We will strive, though mere mortals in his service. Everlasting shall be our true duty. Et imperator invocato diabolus demonica exorcism. The Canticle of Absolution of the Grey Knights. known as the 666 Secret Words. End quote. So,
I love
who
it.
are the Grey Knights? What do they do? And how did they come about?
Alright,
The Grey Knights are among the
so now is the point where I started to listen and actually put in stuff. I love to listen to his intros without saying anything, but we'll see if I can put in some stuff here that he didn't cover.
most rare of beings in the Warhammer universe.
Yes.
For even the Custodes are 10,000 strong in number. This chapter adheres to the limits applied to all Astartes by the Codex Astartes, despite it having no bearing on them whatsoever.
Don't really agree
But they
with
are
that.
still, technically, Astartes. Space Marines.
Mm-hmm.
I say technically for good reason, for they are as unlike their brethren Space Marines as is possible. This comes not only from their role, their training, the abilities they wield, their equipment, but also from the very blood that flows through their veins. The very implanted organs that took mortal humans and forged them into something more. So very much more. Each of the Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes, has one thing in common, one thing that unifies them. They are children of the Emperor. Yet it is more accurate to call them grandchildren of the Emperor.
True.
For his sons were their Primarchs. 20 Primarchs for 20 legions. 21 if you include the twins who were, or are, the leaders of the Alpha Legion. Each Space Marine has parts taken from their Primarch's DNA, additional organs grown from the genetic stock of their Primarch and then implanted in the human. Hence Marines are all gene grandchildren of the Emperor. But this is not so for the Grey Knights. For the Grey Knights have organs implanted into them like any other Marine, have test upon test placed on them, even more so than any other Marine. But the origin of their gene seed is not a Primarch. The Grey Knights are not like their brethren, and not really comparable due to one simple fact. One huge difference. The gene seed of the Grey Knights comes directly from the Emperor himself. The blood that flows through their veins, the organs inside their bodies, the powers gifted them, all stem directly from the God Emperor of mankind. They are beings of a different order. The differences between a Grey Knight and a standard Astartes, if there is such a thing, are massive. The Grey Knights are incredibly powerful psychers, every single last one of them. The gene seed of the Emperor has gifted them with abilities that would be the envy of even an ancient and formidable librarian. Yet any Grey Knight would outstrip them in sheer power as much as a star would eclipse a candle. More than this, the Grey Knights have taken on some of the purity and the will of their gene father, the master of mankind. Thus it is that of all of the groups, legions or chapters of Space Marines, only the Grey Knights can state that never, not once, has any single member of this order fallen to chaos or corruption. In 10,000 long years of warfare, of temptation, of confrontation, staring wide-eyed into the abyss itself, not one of these warriors has even for a second broken or bent. None have ever forsworn their oaths, nor their fealty to the throne.
That is very true.
But why was this one chapter, this one group of candidates for Space Marine status bequeathed such a legacy? Why did they come into existence? For this, as with so much of the present setting, we must go all of the way back to the time of the Horus Heresy, the dawn of the Imperium. Horus Lupercal, the most favoured son of the Emperor, had gone into open rebellion and corrupted a full half of his brothers to his cause. He was, of course, just a puppet. Those pulling the strings were the corrupting powers, the four main gods of chaos: Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slanesh. With his Emperor, his Imperium ablaze, and his son coming to knock on the very gates of the Holy Palace on Terra, the Emperor was forced to take action. He knew that the outcome of the battle before him was dire, and it was intensely likely he would not be able to lead and shepherd his people, humanity, thereafter. And when a psyker of this power has a feeling, then they are usually right. The Emperor thus gave a mighty quest to his oldest and closest ally, his one confidant in all of his life, Malcador the Sigillite, the man who would ever be seen as the left hand of the Emperor. Assuming that he and his loyal sons would somehow win out, the Emperor tasked Malcador with finding individuals who could be used as a core to a new force, a new order. An order dedicated to searching out and eradicating the forces of chaos wherever they may arise, whomever they may possess.
Had to grab a drink, guys. And here we go again.
Malcador was tasked with finding men of supreme ability, resolve and integrity. The rarest of jewels in the rough, as one might say. Malcador was to find not only humans, but also space marines who met this criterion. They would need to be loyal to a point of fanaticism, would need to have the individual self-worth and strength to never be tempted onto the path of darkness, no matter the situation they found themselves in. They would need to be as inured to the powers of chaos as was possible in a human being. Each was to be, quite literally, 1 in a billion. Malcador the Sigillite was tasked with this endeavour, as he was not only the most wise and able of all of the Emperor's many attendants, he was also the most gifted psycho of history, second only to the Emperor of mankind himself. Malcador could be trusted to be discreet, could be trusted to be indefatigable, and could be trusted to never fall to the many wiles of the dark gods. He could read the minds and hearts of any he met, could judge not only their outer facade, but their inner worth and potential. And so he set forth from Holy Terror, the cradle of humanity, and the throne world of the Imperium of Man. He searched and scanned, found and discarded many, but eventually returned home to Earth, to Terra, with his chosen few. Malcador presented his hand-picked dozen men to the Emperor. The Emperor knew that the choices had been good, and the character and ability of these 12 men was second to none. In a time of legends, they were heroes. The names of Garrow, Janus, and Loken even then resounded with glory. 4 were mortal men, 8 were Astartes. The 4 men were tasked with the creation of the Holy Inquisition. They would be inquisitive minds, yet made of adamantium. They would go on to create the base framework of the Inquisition. I shall go into more detail in a future entry, but for now, the Inquisition are those fanatically pure and driven humans who search out and confront all forms of heresy and evil that might threaten the Imperium of mankind.
They are absolutely insane.
There are 3 distinct branches: the Ordo Xenos, who hunt and confront the influence and power of all of the aliens who systematically and continually attack the Imperium day after day. The Ordo Hereticus, the wing of the Inquisition that attempts to maintain the purity of the Holy Ecclesiarchy and the message of faith among the stars. They hunt and annihilate all that is unclean and may tempt humanity into heresy. But the last was perhaps the most important, for the purpose of this context at least, the Ordo Malleus. The Ordo Malleus, the state's recruited, trained, equipped and sanctioned inquisitors who hunt out the foul stench and influence of the demonic. Wherever there is a gathering of demons, cultists or their servants, the Ordo Malleus is not far behind. But what most often happens is very simple, for although inquisitors are trained beyond the wildest dreams of most humans, are equipped with the finest humanity can provide, they are still humans, even be they psychers or no. Often the powers of chaos are so strong, their demon princes and mighty minions can simply crack an inquisitor's skull by looking at them hard, can turn air into fire, and the water in someone's body to become mist, can strip the skin off a human by merely twitching a finger. In these situations, against such adversaries, even the mighty inquisitors with all of their protections, equipment, blessings and bindings, all of this is not enough. In these situations, where a truly dire threat to the Imperium at large has been detected, only then will the Grey Knights be called in. The Grey Knights are attached directly to the Ordo Malleus, their chamber militant, as it is called, though it would be a foolish inquisitor indeed who thought he could order the Knights. Their presence is requested. If they arrive or not is utterly up to them. So this is how the Inquisition was formed, the result of a grand quest by Malcador the Sigillite to find the brightest and best of all of humanity. But what of the Grey Knights? In the days that followed the presentation of the dozen to the Emperor, the mortals formed the Inquisition, while the 8 Space Marines who had been chosen, who had passed the most rigorous testing of all in any time, they went to the moon of Titan. So powerful was Malcador the Sigillite, so subtle and skilled in his craft, that he had bent his entire wheel to hiding the moon from the prying eyes of all. Titan simply did not exist in the minds of any who would try to think of it, try to locate it on a map. Their eyes would slide past it if they were at a telescope, or even looking out of the viewport of a vessel passing it. Titan was locked away so thoroughly that it might as well not have existed. Here, the 8 Space Marines went to find that a monastery of surpassing size, quality, and defenses had been created for them. Malcador did what he could in the time he had left, leaving one of the warriors, Janus, as head of the new order. When his time had elapsed and he was needed again on Terra, as the traitor fleet battered through the defenses so carefully put in place by Rogul Dawn, he had to leave. But as Malcador left the moon, he activated a grand incantation, a spell of surpassing size, power, complexity, and subtlety. In this way, the entire moon was transported into a sub-pocket of the warp. It simply ceased to exist. Held in the warp, it was surrounded by Geller fields, which I shall go into more at a future date, and stacks of interlocking spells set up by Malcador. In this way, they were free from the threat of Horus and his fleets and warriors. But more than this, time moves differently in the warp.
Yes, it does.
When the moon of Titan finally reappeared in real space, it was years after Horus' heresy and the Scouring had occurred. But these years in the real world had equated to decades or more for the inhabitants of Titan. They had used their time wisely. When they emerged from their isolation, the new chapter of Marines was no fledgling. They had trained and perfected their arts, their methods. They had prepared. And so the Grey Knights were fully formed, and were inducted as a part of the second founding, the time when the Space Marine legions were broken down into chapters. As such, they gained a number for that chapter, that of 666. The Grey Knights are the 666th chapter of Space Marines. Despite wearing Space Marine power armor and being post-humans of a similar genesis, the Grey Knight is not a standard Astartes with extra shine. Grey Knights, as has been noted, are the most powerful psychers that the Imperium knows. Their gene seed coming from the Emperor not only endows them thus, but it makes them particularly dangerous to demons. Some of their number, the most pure, the most powerful, are such receptacles of the Emperor's light that their mere presence in the proximity of a demon will make the entity burn and writhe in anguish. If this is maintained, they are smashed from reality by the mere goodness of the Holy Knight. I will not go into the full extent of their war gear at this time, for it is far too interesting and important to skip over, but I shall give you an idea of their magnificence. For the Grey Knights wield weapons that have their genesis in the dark age of technology. So powerful are their weapons, both ranged and in close quarters, that few demons can stand against them for even an instant. Their firearms are what are known as silencers, with a P at the beginning. They psychically activate the shells of the bolter, the silencer, so that the exploding armor-piercing shell is also infused with holy psychic power. Thus are they also inscribed with runes of power that allow them to pass through warp-borne shields and armor like they were not even there. The Grey Knight's bladed weapons are of the most supreme quality, but also inscribed with rune upon rune, glyph upon sigil, stacked to become weapons of terror to the demonic. With such weapons they can not only banish the Dark Neverborn from reality, they can also sometimes outright slay them, destroying that which believed itself to be immortal and invulnerable. But these are just some of the weapons in their arsenal. An arsenal that is the envy of the other wings of the Astartes, if they were ever permitted to even remember their use. For the Grey Knights are also the only human force that actively permits the use of alien or Xenos artifacts, weaponry and protections. For the Grey Knights are so pure of deed and purpose that it is felt that the meagre allure of the Xenos are nothing compared to those the Knights are trained to endure and resist. Hence the Grey Knights can wield weaponry with a clear ancestry in Elder or other craftsmanship. At the very end of the day, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this arena alone of all things that occur in the vastness of the galaxy. Only in regard to the demonic and corrupt, do all other policies and practices get ignored or overwritten, and only for the Grey Knights. But this is as it should be, for no other force must face what the Grey Knights actively hunt out. None other can be called to such peril and have such high cost attributed to their success or failure. For if a force of Grey Knights arrives and is not victorious, it could lead to entire swathes of the galaxy falling under the influence of the dark powers of chaos. The Grey Knights must not merely have an exceptional success rate, they must succeed every single time. To do otherwise would be catastrophic, not just for them, their local human brethren, but most often for the very fabric of reality itself. For none now know if the Cicatrix Maledictum is the end of the contagion of chaos, or if it is but the first stage in the total merger of the two again, the Materium and the Materium, the real world and the warp. For they were not always separate as they are now, but should the realm of the warp leak into reality and cover it all, then there would be nothing but an eternity of pain and suffering for every single last organism in the real world, from the Emperor down to plankton. Nothing would be safe, and nothing would be free. Hence it is that the Grey Knights have attempted to stymie, if not eradicate, the influence of the dark gods of the warp for all of the years of the Imperium. They confront the warlords and champions of the dark powers and banish them. But that is not all. That is often just the beginning of their work on a world that has been infected and infested by chaos. The whole point of the Horus Heresy is that many will state that the Emperor did not inform his people, even his sons, of the existence of the warp and its dark denizens. He let his sons believe that all chaos spawn were more likely negatively charged and very aggressive flora or fauna, and had no purpose and no drive other than to destroy.
This is true.
This proved to be a fundamental error, some say, but it is the activity of temptation that is the keenest threat from chaos and its dark masters. For the power of the warp is never direct and never blatant. Never. When you see it, you know that there is something more occurring elsewhere of more import. This is how it works. The dark gods will always strike when someone is weak, or scared, or defeated, will always tempt not when someone is happy and safe, but when they are in need. Alas, with the galaxy as it is, with Xenos and mutants, heretics and traitors behind every nebula, hidden beneath every ruin, lurking in the shadow of every seemingly dead star, there are no shortages of people who will call out to the Emperor in their need. But if he does not answer, if he does not immediately smite the besiegers' foes, well, what would happen if humanity at large knew that there were dark forces that could grant them wishes, could promise a life of plenty, could strike down one's foes? Would the temptation not be too much? For I have no doubt that it can sometimes take only one, just one person to break. When their prayers and wails for assistance are at their highest point, their most desperate, sometimes they are answered. Sometimes his forms are rent in space, and even just a slither of malevolence can sneak through into the real world. A slither that can grow, manipulate and guide, harass and encourage until there are millions of worshippers and devotees,
That's just
all
creepy.
then put to opening greater, larger rifts. So larger and more powerful elements of the warp can cross over. Hence it is that a speck of snow can become a snowball and then an avalanche. It can sometimes take only one to break. In this way, it is considered that ignorance really is bliss. But it is also the greatest defense against the forces of chaos.
True.
From a certain point of view, at least. With this knowledge, the practices of the Grey Knights have been simple. Secrecy. If someone were to remember the activities of the Grey Knights, they may remember the horror that they fought against.
True.
So the circle completes if any part of it is still in place. Entire worlds have been declared exterminatus and eradicated, or forced into ships to be transported elsewhere, only to have their bodies jettisoned into space when they are at their most vulnerable. These are extreme cases, but all too frequent. This particular practice led to the Grey Knights having a confrontation with the Space Wolves, the Volca Fenrica, after the First War of Armageddon. The Knights wished to prevent the knowledge of the profane from spreading, so ordered the eradication of the population of Armageddon. Alas, the Space Wolves believed that this was a poor way to repay the gallant souls who had fought so hard against the powers of chaos to simply be culled. This particular event I shall cover in another video, but it goes to show the difference in perspective. The Space Wolves and other Astartes have the luxury of believing in honor and the sanctity of life, and that service to the Emperor deserves recognition and clemency. Alas, the Grey Knights view things differently. For them there is no succor, no comfort to be had from these concepts. They know all too well that good intentions and hope alone will not protect them, nor their race, from the ravages of the despoilers. They must weigh the survival of a planet's population against the system, the sector, the segmentum, the entire Imperium. When it comes down to it, the Grey Knights know it is as much a game of numbers as any other. Despite how it may gall them to execute those who have stood against the darkness, the potential for survivors to bring on more darkness to allow breaches into real space is simply too high. Thus, they have often used mind-wiping as a tool.
What he was talking about with the Space Wolves is called the Months of Shame. And after the First War of Armageddon, which was when Angron came to Armageddon, the Inquisition had all the survivors rounded up and started killing them. And the Wolves did not view this with a positive light, and it wound up being a cold war between the Wolves and the Inquisition.
Each Grey Knight is very adept at traversing the mind of any human, and then simply burning out the knowledge and memory of the events in question. This can take time and a lot of effort. It is not always possible for them to thus wipe all people. They may have to concentrate on performing this on key personnel only, while the rest are systematically removed from the equation. When the Grey Knights go into combat alongside any of their brother Astartes, this practice is performed. Only the chapter master is permitted to know of the Grey Knights, and only he is permitted to remember the events that took place. Even then, it is not always the case. If a chapter is new, untested, or under any question or doubt, then even their chapter master can have his mind scourged with the memories of the knights and their deeds. There is so much more to tell of this mighty order, the rituals they use to discern the names of demons, the 666 greatest demons that are listed in their tome, and the way that they take quests to defeat one to join certain groups within the order, the powers of their minds and their command of the Immaterium, the teleportation jump from one spot to another, a feat none but they can perform due to having to transit through the warp itself without Geller fields. But all of these things will have to wait until further entries, or we would be here all night. Truly, the Grey Knights are like walking into a Crowley work or a medieval sorcerer's tower, for they are positively dripping with wards, runes, glyphs, incantations, and the uses of true names and exorcisms. The war they wage is far more of the will than the matter, yet every confrontation must end in the use of weapons of war. But here is where we come to the conclusion of my introduction. The question I posed at the very beginning. Are the Grey Knights now obsolete?
No.
Is their way of acting and the entire goal of trying to keep the demonic a secret now utterly redundant?
No.
Now that the Cicatrix Maledictum is there for all to see, can the Grey Knights simply ask the entire population of the Imperium to simply look away? Nothing to see here. Doubtable at best. As time progresses and more worlds are assaulted by chaos warbands and beings, it is ever becoming less likely that this particular cat will stay in the proverbial bag. Add to this the recent events and the psychic awakening. Humanity has been on the verge of a mass transformation for millennia, perhaps longer. The psychic awakening has already seen entire populations of worlds bathed in chaos and come out with psychic abilities. Entire populations. That is millions and billions of lives, and each and every one of them is a potential expressway from the warp to reality. The Grey Knights, as they now exist, could become a thing of the past. Their war against the forces of evil has slipped from a border scuffle away from the prying eyes of the media and has now been forced central stage. The massed attack on Ultramar, the invasion of Holy Terror itself, plus the endless predations of warbands and legions appearing out of the warp, out of the Cicatrix Maledictum, means the old ways may have to be a thing of the past. The Grey Knights have effectively lost their war. The galaxy as a whole can now see the influence of evil, of chaos. For the Grey Knights to remain as is would be dogmatically locking the barn door when the entire herd has stampeded out into the galaxy.
This is true, though.
Thus, the Grey Knights have few options. Do they declare themselves failures and close shop? Do they give up on their quest to protect the Imperium and the entirety of the human race? Or do they evolve? With the escalation of the threat and the need to meet it, and the potential for all Space Marines to become powerful psychers with the psychic awakening, perhaps the time of the Grey Knights, being an order of only 1,000 men, has come to an end. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed my introduction to the Grey Knights, then please do consider liking and subscribing. And if you do so, please do press the alert button. I would not wish you to miss out. If you are a regular gentle listener, do also please consider supporting us on Patreon.
There we go.
Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make time for some fun. Toodaloo.
And that was Baldermort's Grey Knights video. And as per usual with him, it's excellence. So one of the great things about the Grey Knights is how much their lore has really been expanded since they were created. I love the fact that certain characters I've read about in the Horus Heresy were founding members. Now, what wound up happening with them, I don't agree that they're only 1,000 strong. I really don't. I think the number is probably closer to the 5,000-6,000 range. Kind of like the Black Templars. The Codex Astartes really doesn't apply to them. But, yeah. The Grey Knights are an extremely powerful group of Space Marines. And he was exactly right. Their time may be coming to an end where they're actually in the shadows. It might be time for them to actually step out. But in any case, like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. And please go by and put a like on Baldermort's video. I have a Discord down below. Jump on in sometime if you see me in the open chat and say hey. I'll catch you guys next time.